Thank you very much. Well, I have lots of questions because I always thought that this was a very fascinating historical case, but I'm sure there are many questions also in the room, so I'll let people talk first. Natalie.
Thank you for this presentation. I have three questions. One is very factual. Is there in Argentina a law against blasphemy? That's the first question. The second question is, did you compare with the Serrano's Peace Christ case in Philadelphia at the beginning of the 90s? And the third question is more general. Was there in Argentina something like a cultural war as in the United States? That is, was this case one among other cases of criticism against contemporary art, or was it totally isolated?
It's not a law about blasphemy, because this was, I think, what Bergoglio was trying to create, not isolated, but articulated, because once you began to see the connections between the different Catholic organizations, you can see that it was a net between them. Then it was not directly Bergoglio who was supporting the legal accusations that were presented, but it was connected.
This legal accusation, how was it expressed?
It was expressed through different ways. One was that the exhibition was attempting against the freedom of expression of the Catholics, which was not true, because what the justice said is the opposite. It were more religious expressions in non-traditional spaces, like in the street or inside of the cultural center. Then it was more expression, more freedom of expression. But of course, blasphemy, which is condemned with death, you know, through according Tomás de Aquino, is a capital sin, and the punishment should be death.
But there is no legal punishment.
No, not at all. But what for me is interesting is that they try to create a context to punish it, or to create the law that circumscribe freedom of expression. Then it was a mix between a very fanatic, because nobody believed in blasphemy, I think, seriously, but this articulation between the speech of Bergoglio and the accusations that were presented in the justice all the time were creating the articulation between this discourse and the legal discourse, in order to create the legal figure that an exhibition that was offending Catholics could not be exhibited.
So the legal argument was only something about the freedom of expression of Catholics? Or?
Everybody was talking about freedom of expression, because the ones that were supporting the exhibition were talking about freedom of expression, and the other ones were saying that the exhibition was attempting against their freedom of expression. This was one thing. The other thing was that the exhibition was an invasion of your intimacy. Then what were the limits of the exhibition? That's why we were really working to keep the exhibition inside of the exhibition space, because we can deal with the field of art. We can deal with the religious.
Is there some kind of legal possibility to argument this idea of intrusion of intimacy? Or?
No.
There was no legal basis for that?
No, because we took care to include this advertising inside of the exhibition space. Then we were creating the legal resources to answer these accusations in advance. That was to say, the limit of art. What is the limit of art? The limit of art is to make the exhibitions of art inside of exhibitions space, then not to go outside of our space. That's why the violation of the intimacy, that means that you are obliged to see what you don't want to see, was created through the mass media, because they were filming the most controversial images and putting in front of everybody, every day, at every time.
So there were very little legal possibilities for the opponents to argument legally their opposition?
Well, in a country that never articulated the law for making, for recurring to censorship, it was unexpected. What was unexpected was that the government decided to use their lawyers to present an appellation. It was never appealed by a government, a decision of the justice, in order to support freedom of expression in a country where censorship was articulated very efficiently in different moments of time. And from the position of the government, it will be much easier to maintain the exhibition closed than to appeal the decision of the justice. And the appellation was based in this unexpected figure that was judicial censorship, because the justice did more than the demander's request. Then it was a very legal cause, very legal discourse behind the battle.
So it was different from the Serrano case. It was very different from the Serrano case on this legal.
Yes, no, and also because in the States, for example, the use of the public funds was efficiently articulated. Several museums didn't receive supports for, it was more control about the funds that were used for promoting culture, for supporting culture. And the funds dedicated to controversial exhibitions or controversial culture was under control. Then what it doesn't mean that in Argentina it's possible to make an exhibition like this again. Then it was a success from the legal point of view, but nobody will be making an exhibition like this never again. Then this is something that is necessary. Any company will give you money for making an exhibition of León Ferrari with these controversial works, never again. And I don't think that any government will give you institutional support for making an exhibition with controversial works again.
So it's a totally isolated case.
It is an isolated case. The process was completely unusual and isolated, yes.
There's no cultural war in Argentina.
In what way?
No permanent controversy between opponents and partisans of.
No, but it articulated in a very efficient way of self-censorship.
I would like to return to that topic because I think it's very important, but I think Giovanni wanted to
Yes, first of all, I have to apologize because I have to leave, so I'm sorry to make a comment and then just leave. It's not very polite. So I thank you for this presentation, this story you told. Bergoglio was wrong, and the winner are Michelangelo and León Ferrari, who seems to be a very Catholic artist, profoundly Catholic artist.
Christic, Christic.
Yes, Christian artist. So what I was interested in, but it's not maybe now the moment to develop this argument, is in what sense is a very Christian or Catholic artist? In the sense that his works are not univocal, are quite complex. The Christ on the you can see him differently.
Yeah.
You can see it as you Catholics of the West are killing people in Vietnam, but also Christ is being crucified once more.
Yeah.
So this is very, and for the Last Judgment, a lot of different subtle questions. Who is the author of this? You told the author was the girl,
yeah. Well, this is how he presents, no?
Yes, but it's interesting as an artistic question to be co-author with a bird. I don't think he's the first one. And then why Last Judgment? What does this work do to the Last Judgment? How this Blasphemy work? I think that I was thinking to the Holy Spirit and then to the really interesting visual transformation of this reproduction. It's interesting because if it was simply an anti-Catholic, very radical publicity advisor, something very simple, would not be so interesting, and maybe all this story would be. So just a comment.
No, I completely agree, and I think that the painful point for him was that the church was not honest and good, and religion was not good enough. He was asking, requesting higher, in a way that they do what they say, you know. Then this is something I agree, and these two readings of the image is true to such a point that it were some priest going to the exhibition saying us that they would like to have this image in the church. Then he said, well, you know, that's incredible, but this double reading, no, that Christ is being crucified again because of the blindness of humans, no, or the guilt of the humans. And the other thing is that the last judgment has to do in a very univocal way. No, I am going now, following his apparently univocal discourse, because he didn't want and he never accepted this double vision that you are presenting, and I was all the time pushing him with this double vision. No, it's ambiguous what you are saying, and he said he was very much involved with human rights organizations. His son was assassinated, and he's very much involved with this cause. Then what he was appealing was to the contradiction in these images when people is just admiring beauty and not seeing that the representations has to do with torture. Then that's why he was, you know, following this way, this reasonment, in order to say, if we are for human rights in the earth, we have to be for human rights after death. Then that's why he was always with this image. But from the going back to another connection is that he's very, very amazed for the artisticity of these images at the same time, because he's using these powerful images that are powerful because Western civilization consider them beautiful or extremely good, and then all these things also contribute to make these images powerful. Then are these images the ones that he's using to say, but in a very artistic way he's using these images. Then I agree completely with whatever you said.
Thank you very much for this very personal presentation. I would like to follow up a bit from the very first question, because I can draw some parallels to, I happen to come from Greece, and it's very often the case that there are cases like that, like Blasphemy in art exhibitions. It was in the Outlook 2004, if I'm terribly wrong. Can you elaborate a bit on the relationship between the state and the church power, essentially, because I think it goes a bit further, a bit beyond the strictly legal framework. So blasphemy is obviously a religious term. It's the church religious justice term, but I guess it's exactly this very curious anti-enlightenment, if you like, position, the relationship between the state and the church, which is not the case in France, for example. It's a fully cosmic state. But I have no clue about Argentina, so could you give us some background about this wider relationship?
Do you have to think that not too many years ago, a president in Argentina should be Catholic? Then the connection between democracy and the articulation of democracy and church is not so independent. Then the political power of the church is strong. But in this case, particularly in this case, it was a contradiction between the government of the country that was more connected with the official line of the church, and the government of the city, that was a progressive government confronting some positions of the church, like, for example, the campaigns for the prevention of AIDS. Then the church was completely against to the distribution, free distribution of preservatives than the government of the city was doing. And then the position of the church was to be against and acting, not just expressing the position, no, doing different kind of interventions in order to avoid the legal approval of these decisions or to have an interference. Then it was a confronting relationship at this moment, not an alliance. But the church and the hierarchy of the church has a very important presence in Argentina. It doesn't mean that the religiosity of the population is articulated in a parallel way. Not necessary. Not necessary. Are not relationships that you can organize in one way. But it was a policy that the government of the city was developing. The church was completely against the legalization of abortion and against different kind of the civil union, egalitarian civil union that was approved 4 years later and in a national context, but at this point was discussed for the city. And then the exhibition, from my point of view, was just a very useful tool for adding additional elements to this other political discussion that was displayed in this moment and very active in this moment. I don't know if I am answering.
So maybe following up on this to some extent, I was wondering if we could also think of it in terms, going really on your presentation, of the entire case's status as what we would call a media event. You know? And I thought of a different comparison in the United States, which was actually chronologically closer, the Sensation exhibition at Brooklyn Museum. And I think, you know, because I've always felt the caso Ferrari is particularly, it tells us very specific things about the Argentine situation in terms of politics, religion, art at this moment, really just before the financial crisis would sort of usher in a new era. It's an interesting moment that all of this seemed to happen.
It was after.
Was it after?
Yeah, 2001 is the crisis, 2004 was the exhibition.
Oh, sorry. For some reason I thought you were
no, but
dates
it's
of the exhibition
interesting
were a little earlier.
because I think that the social organization, you know, the way that people was organized through email, for demonstrations, for different ways of supporting, was possible because it was accumulated all these social ways of organizing after the crisis. Then I think that this one was one of the reasons why it was not so easy to close the exhibition. It were overlapped these situations.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and my my concern that in comparing Sensation though and your show is the controversy over Sensation was largely perceived as a completely cynical manipulation of the media by Rudy Giuliani to rally his supporters in his own cause. It was understood immediately as a convenient issue, a fuss that he could make, and it was also understood that the Brooklyn Museum was more than happy to have the publicity to sort of be the source of controversy because it would help their public profile. You know, and what a difference between the kinds of urgencies and tensions that you were showing us in this case. And my biggest question would be, and it really, I wanted in a sense to call attention to your curatorial model, which I love, which this idea of looking for a third space between the seeming separation of aesthetics and politics in Ferrari's work. You know, because for me, there was so much in the show of his quasi-journalistic exposure of the crimes of the dictatorship. And I wonder if there was, to some extent, a way in which some of the fuss over religion was functioning as a way to try to stop the exhibition, just as much because of this political content, this excavation of
the past of the church and
and of course
the alliance of the church. This the same officiality that was well, in a very controversial situation or connection with the dictatorship. I don't think so. I don't think in this specific situation, even this journalistic archive he did, it was exhibited probably for the first time in a very public arena, but it was not the area that got attention. It was more the offenses to Catholic figures. It was another archive that León Ferrari prepared during the same month that he was collecting all this news that has to do with the complicity of the church with the dictatorship. He did two archives. He sent these archives by mail because he couldn't cross the border. He was escaping. Then he couldn't cross the border with this compilation of news. Then he sent by mail. And the compilation, he sent to different friends in Brazil. And the compilation about the church was lost. Then, but at this point, I think that in the exhibition were more powerful the images than the texts.
Can I ask if you included images from Nunca Más? Did you include any of the covers?
Yeah, it were included in the same space. The Nunca Más is the report that was elaborated about the dictatorship, and he did a series of collages that were included with the reprint of the report published by a newspaper, Página 12. And I framed all the covers of the magazine. Yeah.
L'exposition est allée, je crois, ensuite au Brésil, à São Paulo, et n'a pas suscité la polémique, les controverses, les oppositions, les conflits que tu as.
Well, I took away all the work.
Et quel est comment expliques-tu une telle différence entre la configuration brésilienne et argentine pour expliquer ces deux réceptions diverses?
Well, of course you can say that the problematicity of images is articulated with contexts. It's not independent. Then the same works were exhibited in Houston and anything happened. All the excrement series were exhibited in Brazil in the 80s and anything happened. I think that the accumulation of all these series in one space was like a bomb, you know? If you have different elements in different spaces, it has not high visibility. But to put everything together, make it, plus this particular context, make the exhibition, you know, to be impossible not to see it. But when I brought the retrospective to Brazil, of course the plane was in the exhibition, but I took all the images of the Pope out, and I censored myself completely. I didn't want to go through this experience again, you know. It's something that I carefully planify. I was responsible of what I was doing, the artist also, but I, as a curator, I didn't want to repeat the performance, you know, as a play again. Then it was a smaller, the exhibition in Sao Paulo, and and it was very visible, but I didn't have problems. It were many potentially because all his work potentially could be controversial. Then you don't know to what images different contexts are sensitive. You don't know really. Sometimes it's the Virgin, sometimes it's Christ, sometimes it's the Pope. If you are in a Protestant country, the offenses against the Pope are not visible or not too visible. Then depends of the context what it's potentially able to create a conflict. But I think that it was not a conflict because the exhibition was smaller, because I took away all the most all images that I didn't know that could be read in this way, and then I took away in the next edition of the exhibition.
I think we still have time for one more question, and I will ask the question. Yes. Andrea, I am very, well, I think it's a very fascinating case, as I say, because it pertains into so many different series in a way. There is a long temporality. It's not a case if you have, I don't know, Giordano Bruno's image popping out, or if you have this talking about blasphemy as a kind of, you know, millenarian concept, and on the other hand, there is this shorter temporality about the memory of the dictatorship, and even the memory of 2001 crisis, and so on. And of course, you have the different temporalities inside León Ferrari's own oeuvre. You have explained this to us. And my question is, what do you think exactly about this weird idea of showing, like the Reina Sofia, the broken work? Because what kind of thing is that broken work? I don't know what you think, but my first idea would be to say that the work has been produced as such by the case, right? It's like, but is it a work of art in which you would accept that the vandals were part of the work, as you said earlier, that the pigeons were supposed to be part of the, I mean, what kind of thing will that new showing of the work in the Reina Sofia be from a historical and an aesthetic point of view?
It's a very good question. I wonder the same, you know, because it was amazing for me to see the work in the Reina Sofia exhibition when it was Principio Potosí. It is an artistic decision to keep the work destroyed, because what León Ferrari did was not to restore the work, that he could do it because he has a lot of bottles in storage, then he can replace it, but he didn't want. He wanted to show the work in its state as a proof of intolerance. He considered that this reaction against that he valued extremely, because it was proving what he was saying, the intolerance that he was trying to show.
Okay, so you mean he wanted the work
he considered
to be
the work
exhibited
complete.
again?
No, this is not his problem if it was exhibited or not. He made the decision not to repair the work because the work was completed. The work was, what the work wanted to say was to demonstrate intolerance. And what the public that destroyed the work was doing was to complete the work. In order
yeah, that's
to
precisely the point. So he assumed the work as his, but considering that this act had been part of the processes of creating it.
Yeah, and it's completely logical in his architecture, because he's trying to prove the intolerance of society. This is his point. This is what he wants to change with his work. And the proof that this is not, this is the same, it didn't change, is that the society, or a part of the society, is proving his point. Then the destruction of the work is part of the work. That's why he always said, thank you, Bergoglio.
Yeah.
Because he considered that Bergoglio make efficient his work, make his point, supported his position, is not against his position. Bergoglio is proving he is right.
And that will be my last question because we have to leave. What happens now that Bergoglio is Pope? I mean, that re-signifies the whole thing, right?
It's a proof that it's a lot of work to do yet, because it's amazing because immediately after the exhibition, it was the election of the Pope, and it was said that was the Ferrari case that was a mistake. Bergoglio did a wrong mistake because he gave publicity to his intolerance. Then the point that Ferrari was pointed out was true. Then it was said that it circulated between the priest that has to elect the new Pope a file with the Ferrari's case. And then that he didn't got it in the first time because this case was against him. And in the second election, it was presented again, it was circulating, but it was behind enough. No? What happened? Well, what happened is what is happening. No? The Pope is now transforming the idea, the apparently traditional idea of the Church, and producing what everybody is reading as a change, which of course I don't think that is a change. And from Ferrari, well, it's a proof of his own failure in the purposes of all his work. He wanted to change the world, and finally he couldn't. He transformed some things, and I think that from the legal point of view, it was a very important success, because it was not something that you can imagine in a country like Argentina, that censorship was legally discussed and sustained. But at the same time, they were very successful in this specific context, because the treatment of the law was postponed for 2 years, and not successfully because Bergoglio is a Pope. Then this is what I can say.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.